What is clearly a myth, but is deep-rooted in our society. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Does anybody remember that urban legend that claimed Tommy Hilfiger was on either Oprah or Rosie O'Donnell's show and said something along the lines of, "If I knew my clothes were going to be worn by black people, I would never have made them"? I was thinking about it the other day and was wondering how this alleged quote, which was pre-internet, managed to become widespread without mass communication and widely accepted as true. I hear Tommy Hilfiger had to create a press release saying he never was on any of those TV programs. Story 2. The fact that in the U.S., an employer can have a policy that says you can't discuss your wages with coworkers. It is illegal for them to even have a written or oral policy stating you can't discuss wages with others. Story 3. That you can use a defibrillator or paddles and to restart a stopped heart. You do regular CPR for that. The paddles are meant to shock an arrhythmic heartbeat back onto a normal rhythm. They don't work when your heart isn't beating. Effing Hollywood. Story 4. Swimming within 30 minutes of eating isn't dangerous. It doesn't cause cramps. Waiting 30 minutes makes it much less likely for kids to vomit. Story 5. The widespread belief that people are sabotaging Halloween candy with needles and razors, despite there being IIRC only one documented case in the U.S. ever. Also that people are lacing the kids' candy with substances. Substances are expensive. Nobody is going to waste their stash on random kids. Answer: there have been 2 deaths related to Halloween candy in the U.S., one mentioned in this thread, and the passing of a 3-year-old in Detroit in the early 80s. Parents blamed the kid getting into candy that had been laced or altered with substances, but it was found the kid had ingested heroin belonging to his uncle, who also lived in the house. There have been numerous cases of parents or kids reporting dangerous items in candy, but it has almost always been planted and posed no actual threat. In the 70s, a teenage girl cut her mouth on a razor blade inside a Snickers bar, only to later reveal she put the blade into the bar herself and injured herself so that her parents would be alarmed and pay attention to her. It's one of my favorite, most fascinating, most annoying urban legends. Story 6. There used to be a thing in Korea about fan passing, a belief that a running fan would eventually deprive a room of oxygen and could eliminate the occupants if they left it running too long. Apparently, the belief was prevalent enough that all fans sold that were usually equipped with a safety auto shut-off timer mechanism, kind of like closed steam irons. Story 7. If you get a raise that puts you into a new tax bracket, you will actually owe more money. My mom used to think getting a raise would result in her making less. Then when I entered the workforce, I saw someone say something similar. I was shocked to learn that this was a common belief. Edit. Hearing people talking about how employers perpetuated this idea makes me feel lucky. Never had an employer tell me that. Awful to hear them lie. Answer. While this is true about tax brackets, the really fudge-up thing is that making more money can disqualify families in the U.S. for benefits or subsidies that they rely on to get by. I have a friend that died last year because her husband got a raise that made it so they couldn't get subsidized health care anymore and couldn't afford to pay for the entire family, so she dropped herself from the plan. Then she got sick and couldn't afford to go to the doctor, and it was too late to enroll. This is part of the reason why the middle class is shrinking in the U.S. It's too expensive to be in the middle class. Story 8. This is in India. If you pass out faint, rub the person's feet to wake them up. TV serials taught the population this trick. Now people do this for all passing out, including drownings, heart attacks, and other serious ailments. Story 9. An engagement ring has to have a diamond. And also as a general rule, it should be worth 3 months of your salary. Both come from an incredibly successful marketing campaign by diamond mining trading company called De Beers. Story 10. A cop has to tell you they are a cop if you ask. Not encouraging criminals here, but if you are up to some shady shoot and think someone might be a cop, shut up and leave. Go about your shady business later somewhere else. Story 11. The amount of myths, clever marketing, and bro science in the health and nutrition world is honestly too much to even list here. Story 12. That a polygraph test can actually be used to detect if someone is lying. This is still used in law enforcement. It's insane. Story 13. That the average person swallows 7 spiders a year in their sleep. Where TF did that even come from? IDK about you guys, but I've had a grand total of 0 spiders climb on me while I've been awake this year. I can't imagine there is any chance that I've had 7 crawl on me while I'm sleeping, let alone crawl on me and make their way directly into my mouth. Story 14. that you need to wait 24 hours to report a missing person. If you sincerely think someone is missing, then report it. The faster that a missing person report is filed, the better chance there is that the person will be found. This is especially crucial when it comes to missing children. Answer: I think that movies and cop TV shows are probably at fault for people dying because of this shoot. Even if the missing person is not a child, you can report them missing right away when you notice that they are unreachable, left important stuff, need medication, etc. Sadly, even cops get influenced by this TV shoot. In Germany, there was a guy who tortured women in his basement and made them send letters to the police so they would not go searching for them. The families even pointed out that there were stupid spelling mistakes the women would not make, and that letters forming Hilfe were made thicker. The police did not care, and the captor ended up eliminate multiple women and put them in barrels. Story 15. The alpha-beta social hierarchy that we observed in wolves. The researcher who performed the experiment realized he had made many mistakes in his original take and has spent the rest of his life trying to undo the damage that report has created. Answer: this is one of the worst, in my opinion, because it influences and encourages a type of dog training that is fear-based and that can hinder the relationship between the dog and the person training them, who is often the owner. The makeup of a wolf pack is mostly familial, and the ones in charge are the mother and father, not some chosen alpha. Your dogs deserve respect. Story 16. That you can't get pregnant if X. Many things can lower fertility, but unless you literally do not have a uterus and/or ovaries, there's always a chance, for better or worse, bon vivant, as some of these pregnancies can be dangerous. I've known infertile women who mothered kids because their husband was hyperfertile, their hormonal levels shifted as they got older, their birth control failed because of medication or surgery, etc., etc. Assume there's a risk or a chance unless the equipment isn't there. Answer: when I was in high school intimacy ed, we were talking about birth control and a guy asked, "Is it true if you pour a can of Red Bull in a girl's private area, she won't get pregnant?" The teacher was silent for a moment before saying, "First of all, we use classroom appropriate terms here. Second, that is both the best and the worst birth control method I've heard. It will do nothing to prevent a girl you have already had intimacy with from getting pregnant from the act, but it will probably make her reconsider ever doing that with you again. And girls talk to each other, so her friends might steer away from you too." Story 17. That the marshmallow experiment demonstrated that kids who can delay gratification will be more successful later in life. On further review, it was discovered that what it actually demonstrated was that kids who are not economically disadvantaged will be more successful. But the most recent study found no meaningful correlation between the ability to delay gratification as a child's success later in life. Story 18. Anyone says you can trim fat in X area by doing Y exercises. Totally impossible. You lose fat proportionally over all areas of your body. You can't just target one area to work on. Story 19. The alpha crap people still use in dog training. Even the guy who came up with it regrets it. It turns out if you're mean to your dog, it's probably going to be mean back. And if it's not, you've successfully traumatized it into being scared shitless of you. Story 20. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Bro, that was a commercial. You've spent your entire life repeating a commercial from before you were born. Story 21. That some people are left-brained or right-brained. The brain has a lot of cells and they all work together. There are plenty of different types of brain cells, neurons, but they don't operate in isolation. Think of the brain more like a muscle. You have fast-twitch muscle fibers and slow-twitch muscle fibers, but they exist and coordinate in the same bicep. Also, like a muscle, the more you use certain parts of your brain, the better you get. When you start playing piano, you suck. After lots of repetition and practice, you become competent. You are literally able to do something you weren't able to do before. This is called neuroplasticity, and it works the same way for creativity, math, etc. The more you practice math, creativity, or anything else, the better you'll get. 2. The idea that humans only use X of their brains. This is so silly. You don't have a bunch of brain that isn't on. Your brain cells consume different levels of glucose during different activities. So your brain's activation pattern looks different depending on what you're doing, but there isn't an area of your brain that's just off and inaccessible. Some areas are more active or less active during different activities. Story 22. In Britain, kids are told that if they eat carrots, it will help them see in the dark. This originated from World War II. It's crazy how many people actually still believe it. Edit. I thought this was only a British myth fact told as kids, as I found out it came during W2, during the bombings. I didn't know it's worldwide spread. Cool to see, though, and that there's actually some truth to it. Story 23. Chiropractors are back doctors. They're not doctors. Nothing they do has any basis in medicine. They basically just crack air pockets in your joints and call it a treatment for an ailment that only they can fix. Story 24. That only women have the biological clock, and that time runs out on it. While men can impregnate a woman while advanced in age, it's not always a good idea. The older a man gets, the more likely their sperm is to have genetic defects. Men over 40 have a higher chance of having children with birth defects, autism, schizophrenia, and pregnancy loss in their partner. And I've also read that some studies are suggesting that certain types of leukemia in children are tied to paternal age as well. For some reason, people don't talk about paternal age during conception much, only about women's ages. And when I've mentioned this in the past on Reddit, I've gotten a lot of angry men calling me a liar. As if it's hard to grasp that when bodies age, sperm production and viability age right along with them. Sperm is in some sort of anomaly that will remain perfect from ages 10 to 100. Everything ages. Swimmers too, my dudes. Edit added the part about leukemia that I forgot to include. Story 25. Bigger is better in bed. A former friend of mine once told me of a guy she dated who was so big, she said, no way that thing is going inside of me. She didn't say his name, but only referred to him as horsecock. Answer, my file tells this story. Many years after HS, he approaches a woman at a party he knew from way back then. There was a rumor swirling all around her in their small town for years. He starts in, I gotta ask. She says, yes, it's true. Then tells a story of when she got married soon out of HS. Husband and her had never been intimate of any sort. Get married, honeymoon night. He walks out of the bathroom. She says, oh no, you ain't touching me with that thing. Calls daddy to come pick her up. Annulment the next day. So for me, the question is it annulment big as the measuring stick? Story 26. That you shouldn't divorce because think of the children. The main emotional trauma that comes with divorce actually happens in the months and weeks before divorce, when the child is used as merely a point in an argument. If you both want to divorce, then do so. Answer, yeah, my parents weren't married, but for some reason my mom refused to leave my dad. Her sisters, my aunts, told her to. He always said, why don't you just leave me then? His mother, my grandma, told her he was no good for her. I can't help but think that the reason she stayed so long is that she wanted us kids to have a dad. Or maybe it was just her trash taste in men, even though she's like the kindest person ever. Story 27. Dominance in dog training show. And as this post shows, the dominance theory is still permeating the culture and its advocates are pushing back, despite the evidence to the contrary. Story 28. Hard work always pays off. I know people that work like horses in heat on Adderall till retirement and get fudge all for it. Edit. I like to point out, I'm not saying working hard is always a pointless endeavor. You can't get anywhere if you don't, unless you're born already somewhere. But it's taught as though throwing yourself at whatever work you can will prosper you, and that is often simply not true. You either have to know or be trained to know how to put your hard work into the right areas and not put up with people who expect your hard work for little in return. You have to work smart as well as hard, but once you've done it for a while, it's enough to just work moderately. The point stands hard work always pays off is a myth most of us get taught as children. Story 29. Bigfoot. Think about it, it's got lots of layers. Adults have always had stories to keep their kids from wandering off and getting into things they shouldn't. People come up with stories that are contextual to their lives. Native people would not have had stories about strangers with candy and vans to keep kids from wandering off. Everything that early indigenous people would have had knowledge of was related to the environments around them. Wild things, wild places, wild people. Also, take into consideration the fact that Homo sapiens have shared this planet with several other hominid species over time. How uncanny valley-ish must it be to stumble into a group of people that kind of look like us, but definitely aren't us. Imagine how early man had to treat living life and raising a family on Earth. Don't wander off or disappear into the woods. There's kind of people in there that will do who knows what. The persistence of Bigfoot belief all over the globe, combined with the fact that there just isn't a Bigfoot, we would have a body by now, or thousands of trail cam pictures at the very least, tells me that there is something very deep-rooted inside of us that puts big, hairy, wild woods people in our minds. Story 30. Zodiac signs. People be using your birthday to find boyfriend, girlfriend. Dude, as if I have a choice to choose my birthday. Answer. My nephew, 12, is big into zodiac signs. He recently went on a big rant to me and my parents about 3 zodiac signs in particular he disliked. He wouldn't associate with those 3 signs at all, because they were always awful people. I then informed him myself and his grandparents were those 3 zodiac signs. He responded, well, there's exceptions to every rule. Story 31. that losing your virginity should hurt when you have a female body part. In reality, the hymen isn't really that much of a thing as society makes you believe. It isn't proof of virginity either. If being penetrated the first time is painful, the person with the female body part is not physically ready to be penetrated. The female body part lengthens and lubricates itself when the person is aroused so that it can accommodate a male body part. Foreplay, and maybe give them a climax before penetration to ensure the female body part is ready. Elidar, is they're tight and dry, they're not ready for penetrative intimacy. Get them good and horny first. ETA, some have pointed out that some people may have a thick hymen that does need to be broken and is therefore painful, but it's not that common at all. And the myth that it always is painful is therefore still untrue. Sorry to those who do experience this. I didn't mean to invalidate you. Answer, I think a major factor in it hurting so often the first time is that it can be incredibly hard to stay aroused and thus lubricated when anxious, and losing your virginity can be anxiety-inducing, even if you want it. It's made to be such a big deal in society, and it's very intimate. Plus, it's normal to feel anxious doing anything for the first time ever, not just intimacy. Someone with a female body part not being super wet the first time doesn't necessarily mean anyone's done something wrong. I think it's understandable to be tense, but you're right that it doesn't have to hurt, and it's not usually about the hymen. Ironically, I think challenging this myth would make people less stressed when having intimacy for the first time, thus making it less likely to hurt. Story 32. Freudian theory of psychoanalysis. It's so rooted in culture that regular people cannot believe how wrong it is. It has been debunked several times, copy pasta from Quora. Here are 3 specific instances where Freud or Freudian psychoanalysts have been way off. 1. Capgras syndrome. This is a rare condition in which a victim of a stroke or accident is able to recognize their close family members like their mother, but they insist that the person claiming to be their mother is in fact an imposter. The Freudian explanation goes in terms of the Oedipus complex. The patient as a child was intimacy attracted to his mother, as all boys are supposed to be in a Freudian world. This then got repressed with the onset of adolescence. But the stroke or accident damaged the brain in such a way that the suppressed Oedipus complex resurfaced. The patient then reasoned that since he is intimacy attracted to this woman, she could not be his mother. Ingenious but completely bogus. There is a neurological explanation in terms of how various stages of visual processing work in the human brain. The important difference is that it is testable or falsifiable through imaging techniques like fMRI. Incidentally, some patients report the same feeling about their pet dog. This dog looks just like Casper, but it is another dog. How does the Freudian hypothesis explain that? 2. Apotemnophilia, or body integrity identity disorder. This is another rare condition in which the patient disowns one of his limbs, say his left arm. He wants it amputated at a very specific place which he can demarcate by drawing a line. Once again, Freudian explanations invoke sexuality. Something about wish fulfillment, or a desire for a stump that resembles a giant male body part, or something about attention seeking, which doesn't really explain why this particular mode of seeking attention. And again, there is a neurological explanation which provides a testable hypothesis to work off. A region of the brain called the superior parietal lobule, SPL, constructs your body image by combining visual, touch, and vestibular sense of balance inputs. When a limb lacks a representation in this region, a discrepancy arises between the body image in the SPL and sensory inputs because the patient can see that the limb is there. This creates a feeling of foreignness about the limb. 3. Homosexuality and parenting. Up until at least the 1970s, the dominant diagnosis in the West for homosexuality in men, treated as a pathology at the time, was in terms of early childhood experiences and parenting styles. Thus, parents who wish for a girl child, domineering or overprotective mothers, and emotionally absent fathers would have boys growing up to become gay men. By the start of the 1980s, it was becoming clear that none of these factors actually mattered, and that predisposition towards homosexuality had a biological basis. Since then, homosexuality has been observed in hundreds of species of animals. A fraternal birth order effect has been confirmed. Each older brother increases the probability of a boy being gay by about 33, and the heritability of intimacy orientation has been estimated to be greater than 50. In general, Freud's theories hugely overemphasize the influence of childhood experience, and specifically childhood intimacy fantasies in shaping the personalities of adults. Footnotes: Adventures in Behavioral Neurology, or What Neurology Can Tell Us About Human Nature. Homosexuality, Parents Aren't Always to Blame, published 1971. Story 33. that snakes are evil and will attack you. Snakes are very shy creatures who are afraid of humans and only bites in self-defense. Story 34. The customer is always right? Yeah, so they say. But it doesn't give the customer to berate the employee. Edit doesn't give the right for the customer to berate an employee. Answer, this one is true, but people misunderstand the meaning. In the marketing sense, the customer is always right, meaning you produce a product. You think it's great. You think it has everything a person could ever need. No one buys it. Instead, they buy your competitors that has X feature. You are not correct, and that is what the customer wants. The customer is correct in what they want and are showing it by not buying your product. People mistake this for, I'm a customer, therefore worship the ground I walk on as an infallible God, when in reality it is simply a marketing saying that you'd better figure out what the market wants instead of telling them what they want. Story 35. That fat makes you fat. Bonus is the ridiculousness of the food pyramid. This country has an obesity problem while proclaiming fat makes you fat and teaching kids that what you should be eating the most is carbs. There's your problem. Answer, yeah, reevaluating that food pyramid as an adult made me gasp at the ridiculousness. Who needs to eat that many carbs? Why would milk products need to take up a whole level? I can't consume any milk at all. Why does cake and sugar even need to be on that pyramid at all? It makes it seem like eating extra sugar each day is balanced. Definitely can see how heavily that imagery of processed food was influenced by money and the food dairy industry rather than the pursuit of good health. Story 36. Here are a few in marine biology. 1. Lobsters can't feel pain. This is to make people feel better about boiling them alive. Well, very unfun fact. Not only can they feel pain, they're actually very sensitive to temperature changes. So it hurts even more than a person boiling alive. 2. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. Goldfish are actually pretty needy as pet fish go, but they look pretty and kids like them. So pet stores came up with the myth that they have a 3-second memory so they could get away with putting them in tiny cramped bowls by saying every lap is a new experience. In fact, they have a memory of about 6-10 months. Quite impressive for their size. And just one goldfish needs a very large terrarium. Goldfish die after a few weeks in the conditions they were usually in. 3. Goldfish are just food for bigger fish. Goldfish being kept in horrible conditions happens so much that some people got the idea that goldfish were literally just meant as food for bigger fish, which is horrible. 4. Octopuses can't feel pain after their head, everything above the eyes, is cut off. Similar to the lobster one, octopuses can actually feel pain for up to 20 minutes afterwards because they have a decentralized nervous system to make each of their tentacles easier to control. They also feel a lot of said pain. They're missing their whole torso after all. That is 4 corporation-made myths about an incredibly specific subject. I could probably go on for years if I knew them all. Story 37. Is it too soon to talk about how GMOs are actually safe and beneficial to sustainable food chains? Or is that still a touchy subject? Story 38. Doing a lot of extra work at your job or working longer hours will cause you to be more valued by your company or paid more in the long run. Every instance of someone I know going above and beyond at their job ends with them getting more responsibility, no extra pay, and swept under the rug. I've seen this at my current job and a lot of different jobs I've worked in the past. Story 39. The concept of pulling oneself up by one's own bootstraps. This phrase was coined as an impossibility, and yet we still expect people to be successful using this as an example. Edit, I fear some commenters miss the point of this. No one is saying you cannot succeed, but grab onto your shoes and try to pull yourself up. You can't do that. This phrase first appeared in the 19th century in a newspaper article criticizing a charlatan making unverified claims. The writer wrote something like, "Next hell tell us, he launched himself over the river by pulling on his bootstraps." Story 40. For Americans, the concept that lowering taxes for rich people creates jobs. It's been disproven by economists. It's anecdotally untrue looking at our history since 1980, but it drives most of our politics today. Story 41. That adult beverage is safer than other substances. It's the most harmful behavior substance worldwide and causes the most deaths. Yet, we're constantly bombarded by commercials and billboards of beer and vodka as if it's harmless. Story 42. The idea that there are toxins in your body and there are certain foods that get rid of it. Find out how by buying my book. Story 43. Astrology. It doesn't matter what month you were born in. How do people actually believe that shoot? Story 44. Alpha males, thoroughly debunked, demystified, and disproven by the guy that coined the phrase. But yet it seems the myth is still going stronger than ever. Adam Ruins. Everything probably did the best, most concise debunking here. Story 45. Men are logical. Women are emotional. Humans are emotional in general. It's just more socially acceptable for women to express emotions other than anger. Story 46. Men have a lower emotional intelligence than women, that they feel less, that women are an emotional mess, that men are strong leaders not influenced by their feelings. It's all false. That women are less intelligent than men. False, false, false. Story 47. I'm surprised I haven't seen it, karma. There is no universal checks and balances system. Sure, if you do good things for people, they are likely to reciprocate, but it's not a guarantee, and nothing is looking out for you to make sure you get what you're owed. Bad things happen to plenty of good people, and clearly, good things happen to some really nasty people. Story 48. Myers-Briggs test and other types of tests to quantify personality are mostly bunk. The results of these tests can vary wildly day to day based on how the person is feeling. It's astrology dressed up as science. Story 49. That we don't have any form of control over how money works. We made it up. We control how it works. Story 50. Turn your new ear piercings every day. Started with needle and thread piercings because the thread was fabric, porous, and would get stuck. Also was advice given for metals that would oxidize. Finally, still is advice given at piercing places that use a piercing gun. Also, piercing guns are safe. Definitely not true, but people still blindly go to these places for ear piercings. Story 51. Vaccines are poison, but those same people will eat McDonald's with a gallon of Diet Coke on the regular. Story 52. That HR is there to help you. Wrong, wrong, wrong. HR is there to keep the company from getting sued. That's it. You mean nothing to them, and any issue that only affects you is viewed as may fudge 'em. Story 53. That female bits are called female body part. What most people mean when they say female body part is actually vulva. Edit, for everyone who is so needlessly defensive, there is a point to be made about the impact this wrong terminology has on female intimacy autonomy. When it comes to intimacy pleasure, for most women, the vulva part plays a much bigger role than the female body part, so it doesn't help when women only hear vulva when they talk to their doctors. So yeah, having a body part that gives you the most physical pleasure and virtually none to your male partner be erased from conversation and replaced with a different term that brings your partner pleasure instead does make an impact. It's not a critical impact, but it's there. Throws Mike out the window. Story 54. My favorites are that you must drink 8 glasses of water a day. That's a totally arbitrary and subjective measure of water. Medical professionals don't give guidelines that are that vague. 8 glasses may be enough, and it might not. It's all dependent on your size and level of activity. Also, an engagement ring should cost 3 months' salary. Pure marketing BS. Maybe once upon a time, that was a good way for a husband to prove that he made enough money to provide for a family, but that's not how that idea came around. It was created by De Beers, a diamond company, sometime in the early 1900s, I believe. They have employed all kinds of tricks to keep the price of diamonds artificially high. Story 55. That the people with all the wealth and power can be trusted to make the rules for the greater good of the whole country and not just themselves. Story 56. That if we allow rich people and big businesses to have all the money, it will trickle down to the middle class. Story 57. That ancient humans were very stupid, which for some reason to this day has been insanely persistent. So much so, we give them nicknames that we pass off as what they are actually referred to as like cavemen or Neanderthals, which doesn't make sense because Neanderthals weren't even humans to begin with. They are a whole separate species of hominid. Ancient humans were very smart. So smart, in fact, I would argue, they are more smart than East modern humans. We definitely do not give them enough credit, at least not as much as they deserve, like goddamn. Answer, ancient humans were very smart. So smart, in fact, I would argue they are more smart than us modern humans. I don't think I would say more smart or smarter. I'd say they had an equal intellectual capacity as modern humans. That capacity was used in completely different ways than we do today. And the fact that we have all these social constructs which allow us to easily pass knowledge down from past generations to future ones, like language, writing, schools, libraries, the internet, cultural and scientific institutions, etc., allows us to skip a lot of the trial and error that ancient humans would had to go through with each generation. I think another part of the problem is that the way we think about intelligence is completely dependent on our participation in social constructs centered around the transmission of information. Like we consider someone dumb if they don't know 224, but that's learned knowledge based on the creation of language, writing, mathematics, etc. An ancient human certainly wouldn't know 224, and our ways of measuring intelligence would deem them stupid for it. However, if you took an ancient human at birth and raised them in modern society, they'd have just as much capacity for learning as we do. Story 58. The belief that microwave ovens emit deadly radiation or contain some kind of radioactive material. As long as you're not in the oven when it's running, you'll be fine. It's all just electromagnetic induction. Story 59. Trickle-down economics. It's a lie that Reagan Republicans used so they could give more money to the already rich. Can you tell them bitter? Story 60. The war on substances. Most substances aren't nearly as damaging as the effects of the war itself. From lack of availability of treatment, to racist targeting of minorities, to actors with very questionable morals getting rich, prison systems, the DEA, corrupt and non-corrupt police teams, etc. Story 61. The idea that automation, imports, AI, or efficiency improvements generally cost jobs. It's complete nonsense. If it were true, North Korea would be wealthy and Hong Kong would be poor. But every presidential campaign is run on protecting jobs from things that have no influence whatsoever on employment. Answer. Well, they do cost jobs. Those changes force the labor market to rearrange, reducing the need for some jobs and increasing the demand for others, all while raising the GDP a little bit. So it's viewed as a good thing in general, but can have an immense negative impact on a very specific job market. Personally, I think we've overreached a bit in pursuit of GDP gains. Some bit of protectionism isn't uncalled for. For example, I was originally supportive of NAFTA, but after the fact, I think the small gain in GDP wasn't worth the passing of some manufacturing towns in the Midwest. It's a political argument at this level, not a clear good or bad. Story 62. Going out into cold weather without a coat will give you a cold, make you sick. Yes, obviously going out without a coat can lead to many things. However, it won't give you a cold even while it's making you cold. I detest coats. I keep a warm one in the car along with gloves, hat, etc. JAC of an emergency. However, I don't wear one in out of the house or into stores. I'm always shocked at how many people tell me I'm going to get sick from doing it. Nope, just a bit cold until I blast the car heater. Answer. I got into a disagreement with my partner over whether or not being cold makes you sick. Him insisting he feels sick from cold, me insisting it's impossible because viruses make you sick. So we did some extensive Googling and found not only does the cold affect your immune system, acute cooling of the feet can give you symptoms of the common cold. Story 63. Immigrants aren't taking your job. Most immigrants work jobs that locals don't want in the first place. Just ask any farmer in a rural area. The ones taking the higher paying jobs are being hired because there's not anyone skilled enough to do it locally. Businesses don't want to sponsor foreigners if they can avoid it because it's very expensive. Story 64. That the USA was founded to be a Christian nation. It wasn't. It was founded to have freedom of religion. Story 65. The Banshee. As an Irishman, I grew up hearing stories about the Banshee. For a period, I grew out of it and stopped believing in it. When you're about to enter a position where you're not sure you'll make it out alive, you're expected to scream like a banshee. So I was driving down the road on a wet day when I heard a blood-curdling scream in my ear that made my spine quiver. I slammed on the brakes before crossing the crossroads because there was no one behind me. Sure enough, a large pickup vehicle speeds through the middle of the road, right where I would have been hit. I stayed there for a minute, unable to get the scream from my mind, until I realized it was Banshee. I stopped at a gas station. Answer. I wonder if there's something similar about Banshee laughter. During a very stressful period of my life as a kid, I would get light flashes in my mind's eye, as well as exploding head syndrome. There's a Wikipedia article about it which perfectly matches what I experienced. Sometimes the explosions and white flashes would appear, with black and white images in my mind's eye. One I got was a young girl laying in bed with two young boys asleep, fully clothed, shoes on, no blanket or sheet. One time I was sleeping and I got a white flash followed by a bang and loud peals of laughter waking me up, and I realized I'd left a blanket over my light to keep it dimmer and it had started to melt. If it had stayed, I could have caused a fire. Story 66. Asking a coworker how much they make is rude. It's not. It's a lie created by the people who pay you. I wonder why. Story 67. Your blood is blue until it gets outside your body, in which case it's exposed to oxygen and turns red. It's always red. Blood is literally always oxygenated, veins less than arteries by a long shot. And it's just like the sky or glacier ice. Blue is just the color that gets stuck in the prism. Story 68. Religion. Many great values that act as pillars of society, but the practical belief is, well, questionable, to be polite. Answer? Yep. Even if one religion was correct, we know and can prove that a person's religion is overwhelmingly based on the area they grew up in. So basically, even if we accept that there is a God, they're clearly playing geographic favorites. I was raised Christian and more or less never really bought it, but the nail in the coffin that gave me the internal confidence to actually reject religion was deploying to Afghanistan and seeing families so incredibly isolated that fundamentally their own nation could not reach or influence them, much less the word of Christ or whatever. Unless you've never left the suburbs, you pretty much have to at some point face the fact that if only one religion is correct, then God is willfully creating souls by the billions with absolutely no chance of salvation. Some people lose their faith because of earthly tragedies which seem meaningless but are allowed to happen. But for me, the tougher pill to swallow was the continual repetition of the creation of souls with the understanding that they would almost assuredly suffer eternally. And people will say, oh, but there's a chance. We all have a chance, which is a bit like calling artillery in on a crowd and taking comfort in the fact that despite knowing 80 or whatever will die, that they all have an individual chance to survive. It's so funny, though. We can see below us a complex hierarchy of creatures, each with different levels of consciousness and so forth. But of course, the only thing we put above ourselves, we make sure to imply we can more or less comprehend. If there is a God, I'm certain he has no particular opinion of me, and were he to ever speak to me, it would be akin to me explaining the world economic theory to an insect. There are just so many more problems with each religion than there is the understanding that they are all but another myth in a sea of myths that men have before and still continue to create to this day. Story 69. America. Columbus discovering America, natives were here first, and edit, Vikings were first Europeans, as many have pointed out. Thanksgiving has a murky history too. Edit, words. Story 70. The myth of meritocracy. If all it took to be wealthy and successful was hard work, then all the unskilled workers who bust their ass every day, oftentimes working multiple jobs, establishing themselves as the foundation of this society, as we saw with the COVID shutdown, would be millionaires. The myth is especially egregious because it exclusively faults the individual and doesn't allow for any systemic causes into the equation. If you're poor, it's just your fault. You didn't try hard enough. It doesn't matter if you didn't have a trust fund to kickstart your life and fund your education. Doesn't matter if you weren't born to a well-connected family that could always find well-paying jobs for you. Doesn't matter if no one in your family has ever owned their own property in recent history. It's all just you. It's just another leftover of the American dream that needs to die. This myth is a direct cause for why people remain willfully ignorant and refuse to do anything to alleviate what is objectively a predatory and exploitative system. Till doctor. Some people are fudged because they're unlucky, and their solution won't come with working hard. They need resources and opportunities, not blindly sacrificing their labor into nothing. Answer, well, it's less about who put in the most work and more about who got the most results, or even more, who got credit for the most results. Basically, you doing a lot of work is not going to help you if people don't recognize you're doing it. That also doesn't say that a perfect meritocracy would be bad, but Tit does say that we aren't living in one. Story 71. Giving money to rich people will make that money somehow incentivize them to create jobs out of thin air, instead of simply allowing them to play dragon on a pile of stolen tax money, bribed politicians, and the lives of broken poor people. Story 72. That the possibility of life evolving on other planets is very small. There are so many planets in the universe. The human mind can't even fully comprehend how many planets are out there. It would be a miracle if we were alone, not the other way around. Story 73. That we live in a meritocracy, that the market will regulate itself, that capitalism is compatible with democracy. Story 74. That COVID restrictions and mandates are in place for grandma's health. And watch how quickly this got deeply rooted into the minds of people. Story 75. That substances addicts and homeless are useless and somehow losers, but children being harmful behavior deserve being saved. That substances addict is that child. Also that somehow white men are what's competent for the job. Answer, no one rescues or genuinely gives a shoot about harmful behavior children either, though. Are you sure she's not making it up for attention? I don't know. He's always been a brat, so he's probably lying. Stop exaggerating. Harmful behavior family member. Loves you and you should be grateful they're in your life. And if you're an harmful behavior teenager, it's even worse. Story 76. that the world is limitless and continued growth is possible, that other species are some kind of mindless drones which don't experience the world and love and fear and suffer, that monetary value has anything more than a passing resemblance to the things people really value, that supply and demand actually measure how much of something is available and how much people need it, that the future is set in stone and we don't have any power, that social constructs are facts of existence and that we cannot discard, transform, and create them at our will. Story 77. That Republicans are better at running an economy. Overwhelmingly, the evidence is that democratically ran governments drastically and in a mind-boggling way drastically, overwhelmingly outperform Republican-ran areas. It is not even close. Look up the data, it will make your head hurt. It is not just by a little bit, it is by a metric ton. Story 78. Any fad diet ever. There is one way to lose weight, and it is to burn more calories than you eat in a day. This means you can lose weight by doing one of two things: eat less or move more. Anything else, excluding surgery or medication, is complete bullshit and almost certainly unhealthy. Some fad diets, keto cough, have you eating less and placing restrictions on your diet. You may lose weight this way, but it is far from the healthiest way to do it. Your body needs the nutrients you get from food. Otherwise, you will feel adverse health effects. Story 79. The self-made man. Everyone has help. Indeed, the known universe is, in all of its fundamentals, on a continuum running from mostly independent dependence to mostly dependent independence, depending, which makes our hyper-commitment to the mythology of the perfectly individuated project not only illusion, but delusion. Story 80. That if you work hard, put in extra hours unasked, and pick up others' slack, you will get noticed, get raises, and advance in the company. Story 81. The idea that the poor are that way because of idleness and that there are easy ways to lift themselves out of poverty if they just work hard. Story 82. Whose society? The most common one about America is that you can't get emergency medical care without health insurance. In fact, it's illegal for a hospital to refuse anyone treatment and has been for more than 4 decades. I'm going to assume that you are looking for myths that are common in many societies. Nobody in Christopher Columbus's day thought the world was flat. It was proven to be round by Aristotle, and pretty much nobody thought it was flat after about 300 BC. Dogs can actually see colors. They can't distinguish them as well as we can, but Fido doesn't see in black-white. You don't actually swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. The actual number is 0. The Great Wall of China is not the only man-made object visible from outer space. Napoleon was of average height, about 5'5" for an adult man in those days. Albert Einstein did not fail math in school. He typically had the best grades of anyone. Drinking adult beverage does not warm you up. Bats are not blind. The Declaration of Independence was signed on August 2nd, not July 4th. The odds of winning a coin toss are not 50-50. The odds are actually about 51-49, with the coin being slightly more likely to end up with the same face-up that it started with. Story 83. More guns, more safety. I'm pro 2A, but even I understand why that line of logic is absolutely stupid. Story 84. Not exactly what you're asking, but there's Scientology. The founder was a pulp science fiction writer and clearly made it all up. Somehow people actually believe it, and to the point that they give up their life savings and family for it. Nuts. I probably got put on a list by writing this. Story 85. Virginity. No one changes a fundamental fact about who you are by having intimacy with you. And there are many different shapes to hymens, which may or may not break during your first time and have probably already been torn before then for reasons that have nothing to do with intimacy. Also, it doesn't have to hurt the first time you have penetrative intimacy. Also, I know this is a mostly heteronormative breakdown, but honestly, the concept of virginity is more heavily rooted in heteronormativity as well. Story 86. Religion, any of them. There is no definitive Bible. When you talk about the Bible, you could be referring to any one of thousands of different versions and translations, each of which has been edited and revised to reflect the goals of the person or people doing the editing. For example, King James wanted to get divorced, and the Pope wouldn't let him, so he just edited a new version of the Bible, broke away from the Catholic Church and created his own, with blackjack and hookers, the Anglican Church. He took the Catholic Bible, removed the books that the Pope used to assert his power over the Church, and voila, the King James Version. The Protestant Bible usually has 66 books, while Catholic versions have anywhere from 14 to 28 more. The Mormon edition and the Quran are basically rewrites, like bad covers of a bad song, and don't get me started on Scientology. Edit. King Henry VIII created the Anglican Church some 60 years before King James revised the Bible. Thanks for the history lesson. Story 87. So many things. Let's go with a few off the top of my head. The zodiac, or anything to do with any of this pseudo-astro stuff. I know far too many people who love NASA and love space, and then tell you Jupiter's in the shadow of Mars' perihelion, while halfway's up Uranus's business or whatever. Also see, anyone who talks about vibrations, ever, just because everything vibrates has fudge nothing to do with that cupcake you really shouldn't eat. I exaggerate, but still. Religious woo-woo. I don't even think I have to expand on this part. I cut out a huge rant about said woo-woo being used as actionable advice here. Cryptids. They're not all Bigfoot and his ilk. Seen far too many people think entirely fictional animals were real. Big Ben is the bell, not everything about it. Unfortunately, we live in a world where, we've all been making the mistake, so might as well. So this point may be moot soon, and so many other things in this vein. The idea that someone's preferred ideology is always an indicator of their personality. Not everyone is an idiot. Everyone is an idiot. Half the people on the planet aren't. They might just be going through something. One that shocked me when I came across it on this site, but the idea that men can't be violation. At least I got to tell a few thousand people to go fudge themselves that day. That even looking at a screenshot of a dodgy link can infect your device with viruses. I shoot you not. I heard this one recently. I should probably submit the story to RinkWorks. Story 88, strictly sticking to American society. I guess the Mormon faith is some myth that a guy named Joseph found religious text in a field. Story 89. Not really a myth, but I was taught in school that George Washington had wooden teeth. They showed a picture of wooden dentures in a museum in our textbook. Once I started educating myself outside of school, I found out he had slaves' teeth and not wooden teeth. Answer: I think you need try educating yourself again. He did have wooden teeth, along with hippopotamus, walrus, and probably elephant ivory, cow, horse, and human teeth. Lead, brass, silver, gold, and tiny wood pegs. Only 2 of the dentures contain human teeth for the incisors on the lower jaw. Who did the human teeth in Washington's dentures come from? We don't know. The teeth were likely supplied by the dentist who made the dentures. 18th century dentists who made dentures frequently maintained a stock of teeth so that they could try to match the size, shape, and color of their patients' natural teeth. Dentists advertised in newspapers to purchase human teeth, and these ads indicate that there was an active tooth trade, particularly in urban areas, gruesome as that is. Through this trade, poor individuals, enslaved or free, black or white, could sell their teeth to dentists for the benefit of wealthy clients. Teeth could also be taken from dead people. Story 90. Here's fun drinking game. Go through posts like this and take a shot every time someone says something about religion being fake. Eventually, you might be tipsy enough to believe that they're contributing something thoughtful and original. Story 91. Not really a major topic, nor a big impact on society, but the belief that your skin or hair will get used to certain beauty products, and once you stop using it, your skin or hair will get worse. Your skin or hair do not get dependent on products ever. I'm talking about just general beauty products, not things with steroids, etc. Story 92. That if you work hard enough, you will succeed. The opposite might be true, though. If you won't make an effort, you won't succeed. Story 93. The tipsy homeless person and personal responsibility for CO2 emissions are both total myths invented by wealthy businessmen to distract you and perpetuate a failing system. Story 94. That cops can't lie to you and have to tell you they're a cop if you ask. If you think about it for 5 seconds, this is obviously not true. Cops lie all the time for a variety of reasons and could never go undercover if this were true. Story 95. The way people casually say a lot of mental disorders. Someone's slightly moody, they're bipolar. Someone likes things neat, they have OCD. Someone puts a lot of effort into their appearance and is confident, they're a narcissist. The myth part comes when people can't tell the difference between the clinical term and when people casually throw it around. Story 96. Bloody horoscopes. The idea that your star sign can influence any of your personality traits is simply ridiculous, especially when the constellations they're based on are hundreds and thousands of light years apart and bear no relation to each other. When you are born, for sure impacts you. Kids born at close to the start of the school year are typically more successful because they are more developed by the time they start learning, and the kids born later in the year suffer and unfortunately never catch up. This can impact your personality. Those more successful are more likely to be more confident, and those born towards the end of the school year could be more likely to be salty, for lack of a better word. But horoscopes are complete and utter horseshit. Story 97. That certain foods are intrinsically good or bad for you. You need carbs, you need sugars, you need fats, you need protein. Gluten is harmless unless you have an intolerance. Most E numbers are just shorthand for naturally occurring chemicals. MSG is not bad for you. Story 98. That oranges are high in vitamin C. Lettuce, strawberries, and guava have much higher concentrations. Vitamin C also didn't cure colds or boost the immune system. This was based on a single experiment with no data, double blinds, or placebos. It's also been proven scientifically in more recent studies that vitamin C does nothing to boost the immune system. Zinc and magnesium are good for that. Story 99. That there is journalistic integrity and that news is informative and not inciting unrest for monetary gain. Story 100. I'm going to get downvoted for this, but religion. Most of these tales were written thousands of years ago, before modern medicine and science existed. This next paragraph in my defense of the people who think I'm prejudiced, it's written. However, I am not against people's beliefs or anything. If you want to believe in it, fine. It's just that I don't believe in all that heaven, hell, and God stuff. It just isn't supported by science. And after asking a few religious people at school, they say that most religious people don't believe in heaven, hell. They believe in the principle that you should be a good person, which I stand by. Story 101. That gums will stick into any place in your digestive system for 7 years. Gums don't have a timer to know when to leave. They just flow through the digestive system like anything else you devour. Don't smoke or you won't grow. Smoking has no influence on how tall you will be. It's nearly entirely genetic. You must wait 30 minutes after eating before going into water, or you will get heavy cramps. It just makes kids less likely to vomit. It's a god-darn myth that everyone believes for no absolute reason. Vaccines cause autism. You have well over 1 million tests and experiments proving that they don't, and one, which is clearly faked and has many flaws that every doctor would disprove in 5 minutes, which states that they do. Believing the one singular is one of the dumbest decisions a human can take, yet look at how many Karens with less than 3 working brain cells are there. Carrots will make you see in the dark. It's exaggerated through the roof, although carrots do have many good things for your eyes. They won't make you get night vision. Heck, too many carrots will literally make your skin turn orange, so you will be the one visible in the dark. Polygraph tests can show that you are lying. It doesn't. It's just a device that measures your pulse. It just guesses the answer. If someone isn't looking in your eyes when talking, Heshi is hiding something. The fact that someone is not looking you perfectly into the furthest parts of your eyeballs doesn't mean they are hiding something. You don't have to look at someone to have a proper conversation, such as talking to someone from a different room in the house. Does this mean they are hiding something? No. You have to wait 24 hours to report a missing person. Of course you don't. If you worry that someone went missing, then you can call cops as soon as you want. But it can just be a waste of time to call them first few hours of missing, especially if the person is already adult. Even me, when I was leaving my beloved first elementary school in Morzestion, I spent literally 2 hours just gaining signings for a note written by my entire class. Cats don't get bonded to the owner, but to the house. The fact that they aren't as joyful and happy to see you as dogs are doesn't mean that they don't see you. Cats can be as good companions as dogs. X exercise burns fat in Y region. Your fat is like a mind of its own. Even when on a starving diet, your body will slow down the metabolism to burn it slower and preserve energy by doing so. So it makes absolutely no sense. Although some exercises will burn more of them than another, it's not completely dependent on what exercise you do in order to burn a certain amount of fat. A lightning never strikes the same place twice. Where TF did this even came from. Of course they do, and they are quite likely to do so. Some people learned about it the hard way. In order for a lightning to strike, there must a passage of and to each other. Higher places are by far the fastest and the most efficient to perform this task. So if you are higher than other objects near you, then you are more likely to be burned in seconds multiple times. Story 102. Native Americans aren't Indians like Columbus. Dumb jerk thought, but we continue to call them Indians instead of Native Americans. Story 103. That eating sugar makes kids hyper. Parents perpetuate this myth by saying it around kids, so kids just behave according to their parents' expectation. Story 104. Making abortion illegal helps the community. Data clearly shows making abortion illegal is counterproductive. Read Freakonomics if you want more context. Story 105. That Republicans are better at fiscal policy than Democrats. A simple search will show you that this is false. Democrats are better with fiscal issues. Story 106. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, are not at all like it's portraited in One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. It's not dangerous, and it's done under anesthesia, and you get muscle relaxants. It's a treatment for major depression, among other things, not some weird torture device. Story 107. Christianity, or any of the Abrahamic faiths for that matter. Edit, I should have stated that this is true for religions in general, not just the Abrahamic branch. I didn't mean to imply as though there was an exception to this. Story 108. The belief that trickle-down economics works in favor of the people. No, corporations don't use it to better the conditions of workers or their salaries. They hoard money. They hoard it in an amount that is hard for us downstairs to even comprehend, and they let crumbs trickle down. Just enough for the people to survive, barely. Story 109. That nuclear power is dangerous, especially spent nuclear fuel. Nothing is without risks, but nuclear power is statistically one of the safest ways to produce electricity. Spent nuclear fuel from a power plant never harmed anyone and is not more dangerous than other toxic waste. It seems that the more the nuclear community focuses on safety, the more it freaks everyone out. Story 110. This one will get me in trouble. Myth. Only white men are capable of being giant assholes when given truckloads of power. Yes, white men are assholes when given a lot of power, but I guarantee any other type of person would be just as bad if given the same power and privilege. The only reason we don't see it often is because everyone else hasn't been given the same level of power. Story 111. Sometimes I think that I should start a myth and spread it everywhere and pass on to the next gen. Society is so stupid that they'll believe anything. Story 112. That if you work harder and go above and beyond as an employee, that your administration will notice and pay you accordingly. This is such a cover to get you to work harder to higher ups while they can just pick and choose pay rates. It's fun hearing from someone who makes 3x as much money as you do and telling you to leave the stresses out the door when coming to work. Those stresses are caused by money BTO and would help even with just an extra $10,000 annually. Story 113. That the U.S. is the most democratic, socially equitable, most advanced country in the world, and everyone wants to come here. As a minority who was born and raised here, I can attest that this myth couldn't be any further from the truth. Story 114. There is zero proof that birds will help themselves to food stuck between crocodiles' teeth and that the crocodiles appreciate it. Story 115. Obsession with university degrees. Sure, there are professions where they are very much needed, doctors, for example, but you can get an office job just by learning stuff online. Achieving results what matters, not your fancy degrees. Story 116. In the UK, at least, fireworks are used by substances dealers to signal when they have more substances available. I'm sure there's easier and more discreet ways to sell substances than literally letting off an explosive above your house, like a phone. Even if there wasn't, what's someone looking to buy some substances going to do with this information? Walk to the vague vicinity of the noise and potter around hoping someone offers? Maybe light up a sparkler. Story 117. That Neanderthals were grunting, primate-like creatures. They had culture and art, and thus had to have advanced language and societal structure. In fact, I bet they'd be hard to differentiate between modern humans. Story 118. That poor posture leads to body pain. That's rarely the case. And when it is, you ever sit in a weird position, spaced out on your phone for a while, then emerge in pain? That certainly happens sometimes, but we're led to believe that our working position that feels perfectly comfortable when we're in it is going to eventually lead to pain. Our bodies are more adaptable than that. Also, pain is poorly correlated with tissue health. Sometimes damaged tissues cause no pain at all, and sometimes we're in pain even though our tissues are perfectly healthy. Pain is an output of the brain, and it's oftentimes an overreaction, signaling to us that something is wrong when there is in fact nothing wrong. Stress is one among many common causes of this overreaction. So if someone tells you that your posture is going to cause you pain, ask them for evidence of that claim. They won't be able to produce it. And if you are in pain, please consider your stress level, sleep quality, adult beverage consumption, etc., before concluding that it's due solely to tissue health posture, because chronic pain is almost always multifactorial. Story 119. Sleeping with multiple people makes you looser and more susceptible to STIs. This is a complete myth. Female body part or muscle. They stretch all the time and snap back every time. And you can catch something with your first, second, or 10th intimacy partner if you're not careful. Story 120. That you got to check your kids' Halloween candy and check for razor blades and shoot. When in reality, there's never been a case of a random kid getting poisoned or getting his throat sliced after Halloween. The real story behind it is some dad tried claiming the life insurance money by poisoning his own kid and tried blaming it on the Halloween candy and some person that gave it out that never existed. On top of that, when kids do end up going to the hospital on Halloween, it's because they accidentally ate something that they were allergic to. Story 121. Don't read this if you got OCD, especially hygiene OCD. Seriously though, it will mess your head up. You'll regret reading it if you ignore this warning. I have OCD, so you can trust me. That detergent cleans germs from clothes. Or is it cleans clothes from germs? I totally confuse myself over there. In reality, it removes the germs from the surface of the clothing, but it doesn't actually eliminate germs. So many germs end up not being drained out with the water, so they end up on the clothing again. Detergent works the same as hand soap. The difference is that with hand soap, you can rinse your hands till all the germs come off with the water. With clothing in a washing machine, perfection like that isn't possible. Story 122. That vaccines cause autism. Like, I can't tell you how many times this has been disproven, but people still believe it for some goddarn reason. Story 123. That all white people are intrinsically racist and the reason for every problem any black person has in life. Story 124. The American dream, belief that hard work alone is all it takes to succeed here. Super toxic grind mentality that doesn't account that some people will get opportunities that others won't, and that some actively try to control barriers to entry. Story 125. Drinking something cold when you're sick gets you more sick, and you'll catch a cold if you step outside with wet hair. Story 126. That if you work hard, you'll be successful. Yes, of course, hard work increases the likelihood, but good luck and being born in the right zip code are incredibly important as well. Story 127. That black cats cause bad luck. My cat Shadow is such a sweetheart. She also keeps the mice and snakes away. Story 128. Zodiac signs. Some people genuinely believe in this shoot. It's literally just a scam for weird niche websites to make a profit. Story 129. Meritocracy. We like to think that the people who succeed got there purely by merit, but in reality, most successful people had huge head starts or advantages that are not available to everyone. There are some genuine rags to riches stories, but they are the exception, not the rule. Story 130. That cops legally can't lie to you. They absolutely can and most definitely will. Don't trust police to have your best interests in mind. They most likely don't, at least here in the U.S. Story 131. The belief that wealthy people work harder or are smarter than the rest as represented by their wealth. We got it bad in the U.S. Story 132. People still think that if you shave anywhere, the hair grows back faster. If anything, it grows back in a different texture depending on where it is and if clothes or anything are suffocating the hair follicles. Story 133. Astrology. The position of the stars was once a valuable indicator of when to plant crops or where animals may be migrating, but it was never causal. Add to the fact that millennia ago when these beliefs started, we didn't even know about all the celestial bodies that allegedly would influence things, and the fact that the constellations are not in the same place relative to the calendar. And it's absurd to think that the stars are still influencing events according to the same outdated information. Story 134. That most rich people are rich because of hard work. That if you work hard, put in long hours, and forgo a personal life, you'll one day be rich too. Biggest fudge myth we've ever been told. Story 135. Alpha males, total baloney. The scientist who first observed and named the behavior, studying wolves in the wild, completely retracted the theory, spent rest of life trying to quash the reductive misnomer. Clearly that didn't work. Similar with survival of the fittest, dog, eat dog world as the natural order of things. Most animals, mammals especially, have relied very heavily on cooperation to advance, not competition. It's the only way civilization was possible. Competition leads to destruction of civilizations. Story 136. That the U.S. federal government needs your taxes to pay for anything. Most people don't understand the sequence. First, the government issues dollars, then it collects them. Taxes are what gives the currency its value, or else they put you in jail if you don't pay your taxes. Story 137. Money. Before money, we had free trade, but the lazy people who had nothing to trade needed a solution. So they gave a made-up thing called currency and told the market people that it had value. Once those traders' farmers were sold on the idea, more lazy arseholes started to follow on suite. And now we have an imaginary debt that no one can see, hear, touch, feel, smell, or take up physical space, or is made out of natural compounds. It's sort of funny. So many people are starving to passing because of this myth, and children just got crushed to passing because of it, and racism still exists because of it. Power money or writer spunks. Tupac knew. Story 138. If you work hard, you'll get rewarded with promotions and raises. The workforce has a ladder system, you know. Story 139. That if you drive at night with your lights on in your car, you get arrested. My auntie always told me that. Story 140. Peeing on jellyfish stings, dog mouths being cleaner than ours, raccoons not being good pets. They're destructive and could harm you. Okay, well, so can dogs and children. Story 141. That going out in cold weather without warm clothes will cause you to catch a cold. The main reason for this myth is in winter months, we spend more time inside, so disease spreads more. Has nothing to do with dressing warm for winter. Story 142. If someone is having a seizure, for God's sakes, never pin them down or stick something in their mouth. Treat them like they're overdosing and roll them on their side, call an ambulance, and find something soft to put under their head. Tongue biting is common and sucks, but chalking on your spit vomit is worse and can eliminate you. Story 143. That everyone has to do their part to stop climate change. This was a clever marketing trick used by BP in the early 2000s. The truth is, if one person cut back all of their carbon emissions to zero, they only save about 1 second of emissions from the global energy sector. I'm not saying we shouldn't care, but the weight isn't squarely on our shoulders. Story 144. That the labor shortages in the U.S. are because nobody wants to work. I don't know anyone who doesn't actually want to work. They just want fair compensation for the work that is expected of them. Story 145. That anyone can get rich if they work hard. Americans are deep into this one. Study after study shows that the odds of a poor person in America becoming rich is literally greater than winning the lottery. Even nationally, the U.S. ranks something like 27th in terms of upward economic mobility, below even Norway. If you're poor in the U.S., you can work as hard as you want, and you're more likely to still die poor. Still, Americans widely believe that wealth can be earned. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.